Saludos mi gente, te habla David Hernández y este es el Meneo, donde estaremos hablando y conociendo las personas que están detrás de la industria de la música urbana, cómo ellos manejan sus negocios y todo lo que pasa detrás de los artistas que crean los temas musicales que tanto te gustan. Hoy conoceremos a Briana Méndez, directora de Genius. Quédate aquí, este es el Meneo. Let's go. Lo primero que te voy a preguntar es, ¿qué es Genius?
Genius is a music knowledge platform, and we give the deeper meaning behind the music. But all that music knowledge, we've been like filtering it into content. So Genius is a media company that's creating like a ton of video content, social media content, editorial articles. And we're reaching like 100 million people across the world.
That's awesome.
Doing that, yeah.
And for the people of Rapetón that don't know you, tell them a little bit more about yourself. What you do there, what's your role involved in with the company? Tell us.
So I'm an account director. I work for the brand partnerships team. So Genius as a media company needs to make money. And so I am the person that's helping facilitate those relationships with brands and advertisers to make Genius some money. But these brands and advertisers are like interested in tapping into Genius to like create content with us, to like create events. They also like want to learn about like music culture as well. So like we help be that bridge for them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
In the beginning, Genius started as a platform to showcase the lyrics of the songs.
Yes.
Right? And the first name was Rap Genius.
Yes.
But then it has transformed completely to showcase other parts of music.
Yeah.
Why that has happened?
So a little bit of a background story. The two founders of Genius were huge hip hop heads.
Awesome.
And they were just like hip hop heads that wanted to like understand like, you know, a little bit of the history that Tupac and Biggie were talking about. And so like obviously there was like an intense hip hop online community that was all about just like breaking down that like, you know, that context, that story behind the music. And so they focused on the hip hop and rap community in the beginning, right? Like annotating rap lyrics. And then they realized that the annotation aspect was a utility that could be applied to any genre, to any music, right?
Y tú siendo una mujer latina de Puerto Rico, ¿cómo tú te sientes trabajando en Genius y cómo tú crees que las comunidades latinas se pueden ver reflejados en ti trabajando en Genius?
Yo soy uno de los únicos latinos que está trabajando en Genius. It's a matter of just like us like knowing that when we're working in these spaces, we have to bring a part of who we are into what we do.
Exactly.
And it did, like, you know, I've been working at Genius for like 3 years. In the beginning, yo casi como tenía un chipito miedo to like speak up, you know? Like, I knew that there was a huge movement happening in reggaeton and urbano. 2017 was when like Latin trap really started bubbling up, Bad Bunny, Anuel. And I started like, hey, like, you know, like, do you guys know about Bad Bunny? Who's Bad Bunny? And I'm like, oh, you guys should listen to Desde. And like, I was in brand partnerships, and I wasn't in content editorial, and like, I had to like start those conversations with those people. And you know, and it's not necessarily like the most easy thing to do,
right?
But I knew that como being Latina in a company like that it's like it's important, because like I'm one of the very few that even understood that in the first place.
Right.
It's about education, right?
Right, absolutely.
It's about education, and like when we're Latinos working in these spaces in the U.S., there's still a lot of education about like the nuances of what we do.
Right, and that brings me to the second point of that question, which is that in the past 4 years, we've seen that in the top 100, we've gotten at least 50 hits from Latin artists. So how do you think that that's impacted Genius content?
The thing is, it's just like the rise in popularity of Latin music, right? Specifically Urbano music, you know, has become so popular to a point where it's like it's hard to ignore, right? Like I think the globalization of music is because of technology, it's because of the internet.
Exactly.
You know, Ozuna, Bad Bunny, Becky G, Nati Natasha, like they have a huge platform through YouTube, you know, through streaming services. So like people around the world are starting to listen to these artists, and people have a choice now of what they want to listen to. You know, it's not only radio. People are leaning towards reggaeton, you know, and because we have those listeners, like they're sort of dictating what popular music is. Right. And Genius is it's supposed to be a reflection of what's happening in popular music. So like that adoption is almost like organic, right?
Right.
That's what's special about Genius is that it's crowdsourced. It's because of the 2 million contributors that are like, you know, annotating the lyrics, right? When Bad Bunny came out at midnight, his fans, like we have a community of I think about like 100 of like super Bad Bunny fans, and they were waiting at midnight to transcribe the whole thing.
Wow.
And then to annotate it, right?
Wow.
I was like, okay, like Daddy Yankee is like sampling from this song y Tiny did this.
Que cuando mencionas lo que es crowdsourcing, para las personas que nos están viendo en Rapetón, significa que todas las personas que están siendo parte de Genius pueden llevar su contenido a la plataforma y pueden ser parte de Genius.
Yeah, and it's for free. It's crowdsourced. It's como Wikipedia.
Okay.
You know, it's actually the second largest crowdsourced website to Wikipedia, like on the internet.
Wow.
Yeah, because we have millions of people who can even upload their own songs. Like, you know, you write your own song, you can easily just upload it on Genius and annotate it.
I've seen that Genius has two main concepts that Latinos has been super involved in, right? The first one is verified, right?
Yeah.
Where the artists literally go through the entire lyrics and then explain them. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Verified is our most like well-known franchise. It has the iconic yellow background in the back. We've had I think over like 27,000 artists come in.
A couple of them are, can you mention them?
Yeah, we've had Anuel AA, Karol G, Anita, Becky G.
Cuando Genius empezó, estuvo Travis Scott, Billie Eilish, Kendrick Lamar, Tyler, the Creator, y ahora se está mostrando, se está promocionando más el contenido de los latinos. ¿Cómo tú te sientes cuando tú ves que está pasando eso y tú dices, wow, yo tuve a Travis Scott y a Kendrick Lamar, pero ahora estoy promocionando y estoy llevando contenido de Rosalía, de Jay Cortez, de Eladio Carrión, que son los nuevos talentos del género?
The artist relations team does a really good job in sort of just like capturing like the emerging artists that are making a lot of noise online, right? Like they have a fan base. I think it's important like in terms of like the artists that we cover like are reaching, you know, like a certain number of people, right? Like we're intentional in that way. But we recognize que Eladio Carrión has a fan base.
Tus besos son fríos como hielo. Me tienes arrodillado mirando al cielo.
You know, even though like he's not on like the top 100, we know that like he is speaking to a lot of people through his music.
Right.
And so we see that there's an opportunity for him to like sit down and break down his music, like his latest song.
And you've seen that, for example, taking into consideration Sauce Boys from Eladio Carrión, it has a lot of influence from Latin trap, from the States. And you've seen that Eladio has shared that he was born here in the States, and then he went back to Puerto Rico, but he has a huge influence of the artists from the States, right?
No, absolutely. And I think that goes back to my point about the globalization of music, right? Like I think that there are rappers today that are probably like American rappers that are being inspired by reggaeton. And we're seeing a lot of these like cross-cultural collabs. And it's cool just because I think like, you know, providing that exposure in a media company like Genius is also like introducing people to these other artists.
Exacto. Y hay otra plataforma de Genius que se llama Deconstructed, donde una de las piezas más importantes fue la de Calladita, donde Tiny entrevistó a Bad Bunny y ellos fueron sobre el proceso creativo de definir lo que iba a ser el sencillo de Calladita. Can you elaborate more on that?
No, Deconstructed is my favorite series that we do because we bring in the producers and you see them on the decks with their equipment on like what like the music that they sampled, like what they drew inspiration from. And literally like you see like how they like layer on like 808s and kicks and everything. And it's absolutely fascinating to see just like how all these sounds are like pieced together. Y ay Dios mío. That episode with Tiny is so special.
Duro.
Because, you know, he's obviously like sampling old school reggaeton.
Right.
But then he also tells you that he's like inspired by like anime.
Exactly.
And it's special because ahora cuando lo escucho, it's a different experience.
Right.
It really is. It's so cool.
Yendo al segundo concepto de lo que es Deconstructed, ¿cuán importante tú crees que los fans deben conocer cómo la música se hace?
I mean, I think a lot of people don't even realize that there's so many other people involved in the creation of one song. I think there's like at least like on average like 10 to 15 people sometimes for like big tracks.
Right.
You know, you have songwriters, you have producers, you have sound engineers. And Genius on like the platform, like you look up the song and you look at the credits and you can see all those people that contributed to it. And I think it's like providing a platform for those producers, for those songwriters, to get a little bit of recognition of like their craft and what they're doing.
¿Cómo ustedes generan ingresos del contenido que ustedes producen y promueven?
I mean, like any other media company, like we make money through advertisements, right? Like the ads that you see on the site. But what's cool today is that like more brands are interested in sort of like leaning into the content and creating branded content, right? They're like, we want to be a part of what you guys are doing.
Right.
Like we've had brands like sponsor Deconstructed, like for example, like Disney when they were coming out with Black Panther, we did a branded video with like the composer of Black Panther and he like broke down like the music from the movie. You know, so there are like clever ways where, you know, these brands can insert themselves in music culture, so we help them like tell those like music narratives for them.
Right.
At the same time, like we also produce music experiences for them. We did something with Acura, a car brand.
Right.
And we had Eladio Carrion.
Of course.
And Mariah perform at this event, and they wanted to create that experience because they want to reach Latinos.
Right.
You know, so there are brands that are interested in reaching millennials, Latinos, and different audiences, right? Or just people who love music.
Right. So at the same time,
yeah.
your company is thinking of producing and promoting content,
Yeah.
generating revenue through the advertising that is being placed around that content, but also for artists that are out there seeing this, it's huge for them to be a part of the activations that you do.
Yeah.
Because you can partner up with a brand, que lo que significa es que puedes hacer un partnership con una marca y esta marca puede hacer un evento alrededor de todo lo que es su concepto como marca y puede llevar artistas que son latinos y los artistas latinos pueden estar ahí pues, mostrando su talento, ¿correcto?
What I sort of preach in the marketplace is that like, what is more authentic than music? What is more pure than music? And music really like knows how to connect with a person, right? Pulls the heartstrings. And if a brand works in a smart way and sort of like inserting themselves as part of music culture, because you have to do it, you have to do it well. You know, I think that there's sort of a fine line in just like how a brand can really insert themselves into the culture. For me, like as a Latina, I'm educating them on like the Latin music landscape, right? So it's like, hey, it's much more than J Balvin. It's much more than Karol G. You know, we have like emerging artists and like Azul. There's like a huge like opportunity to tap into the Argentinian trap scene with Duki, Casu, or it's like you can tap into like the Latin trap movement that's happening in Puerto Rico. You know, and these people and these corporations, like they you know, they're not necessarily exposed to it. You know, and so I think it's like it's a really special opportunity to help advocate for that, and then these like music communities, right? Like they get paid.
Claro. ¿Cuáles son las cosas que tú crees que tienen que pasar para que las compañías de medios estén más involucradas con lo que es el movimiento latino? Eso es importantísimo.
Sí, you know, it's education, it's persistence, and ultimately it's patience.
Right.
Unless you're in a leadership position, you know, unless like they hire you to be like the Latin music director for that media company, then it's like you ultimately have that like influence is sort of just like how that looks like.
Right.
But Genius doesn't, that position of Genius doesn't exist yet.
Right.
You know, we don't have a Latin music content director. You know, so it's been me and some other Latinos at Genius sort of just like educating, you know, the people that we work with. That's like, hey, like there could be an angle like covering like, you know, Sky Rompiendo on Deconstructed. You know, like there could be an opportunity in like digging deeper with Tiny and doing a whole like video series just about Tiny.
El entourage completo, no tan solo el artista, sino su manejador, su equipo de trabajo, sus bailarines.
Sí,
que eso es muy importante ahora mismo. O sea, hoy día hemos visto como ya el artista sigue siendo el artista, pero también su equipo de baile, su manejador, su productor.
A new series that we're coming out with.
Eso es súper importante porque la realidad es que ellos son también parte del proceso creativo. Y ellos también quieren estar en esa posición donde obviamente la gente ve el tipo de trabajo creativo y el arte que ellos hacen. Y eso es huge ahora mismo.
It's huge. Ultimately, you know, once they get a better understanding of like what's going on in that part of music, they get it. We produce a video, it gets 1 million views, and they're like, oh, this works for us.
Right.
You know, and then we can produce more.
Right.
But, yeah.
To ask you, we've talked about artists, we've talked about media companies, we've talked about content, we've talked about the audiences that consume the content. How do you think that artists can be more exposed to the opportunities of being in different media companies?
You know, the way I see it is that these media companies, they're supposed to be a reflection of what's happening in the culture. They're supposed to be reporting on what's happening, you know? So I would focus, like as if I were an emerging artist, right? That's trying to make it big, that's trying to get like a feature on the New York Times, or trying to get on a Genius video. And I even have like some artists too, like sending me messages on Instagram, like, yo, how can I get on Genius?
Right.
And I think like the best piece of advice is like focus on your fans, you know, focus on building that audience, building that following, and then the media companies could pay attention, right?
Claro.
And then once you have that audience, you know, it's like, hey, like I sold out 3 shows in Florida, you know, like I'm redefining like what Latin trap is in California, you know, or I'm a Mexicano like trapero who's trying to make it big in Texas, you know, and like you know your story, you know your angle, and you want someone to tell that story, then it's like you could take it the next step and start pitching people, right? You can start like emailing someone that works at that company, maybe even using Twitter, maybe even using your Instagram just to like get people to recognize like, hey, this is what I'm doing, you know, these are my fans, like I'm creating something, you know, and then ultimately they should be paying attention.
Claro.
And I think, you know, like the way we sort of like identify artists at Genius is like we see that they have a following, we see that they have fans, you know, we see that people are listening and streaming their music. It's like, oh my God, like this YouTube video in 3 days got 4 million views. What's this? Who's this artist?
What's happening there?
Yeah, who's this artist? And it's like, oh, we bring them in, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which makes me think about how women is being represented right now because they have done so much work that they have a following now that actually wants a lot of their content. And it's not that they didn't want them before, it's just that now they have put so much content out there, great content, that the audience wants to consume more and more and more of that woman. ¿Cómo tú crees que las mujeres hoy día, específicamente artistas como Karol G, como Becky G, como Rosalía, como Kazu, como Nati Natacha, pueden entrar en la conversación de los más grandes del género como J Balvin, como Bad Bunny, como Daddy Yankee, como Ozuna? ¿Cómo tú crees que eso puede pasar y qué tú crees que debe pasar para que eso esté sucediendo?
I honestly see Karol G at the same level as J Balvin. I think, you know, like we need to allow these women up top to take up more space, right? And I think that they're starting to more than ever, and it's cool, but like, also, I think it's like a problem with the industry, ultimately. You know, like the music industry in the US, también the Latin music industry, it's like most of the gatekeepers, decision makers are men. And I think it's a matter of them starting to recognize that like there's a huge female audience, that there are plenty of mujeres that want to feel represented in the music, right? Which is the reason why we're seeing such a huge success with like Karol G and the Becky G's and Nati Natasha. And to recognize them and to give them that platform, but as well to create more space for more Latina artists, you know, for more tomboy like Latinas, more Afro Latinas, you know, more plus size Latinas, you know, like we need to see
diversity and inclusion.
Diversity, absolutely, because there's so many of us. There's queer Latinas, like, you know, and they're all creating music too. They're out there, you know, and it's a matter of giving them more space, giving them that platform. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think like we're seeking that. I think music listeners want to see more experimental music. Like they want to see different sides of the music that they like. And so people are going to be tuning into that too. So we're definitely going to see like more of that in the next couple of years.
Quiero agradecerte por estar aquí en este nuevo show, El Meneo por Rapetón. Súper afortunado de tenerte aquí. Gracias por toda la información.
Oye, toda la información.
Toda la información que compartiste fue súper valiosa. Estoy súper agradecido contigo y esperamos que a la gente de Rapetón le guste, lo consuma, lo comparta. Así que seguimos Y te deseo mucho éxito. Vamos para adelante.
Yes, para adelante.